Hey, so a little bit of an unscripted video today. First of all, before I actually get into the topic of the video, I just want to thank the three translators that worked with me on the Japanese translation of my Zelda guide. That was a pretty massive undertaking, and a huge thank you specifically to Yasuhiko Komatsu, who is somebody who I worked with directly in order to get that guide to Japanese audiences. It's been pretty cool, and the response has been pretty nice, so I'd like to thank them for doing that. But on to the discussion of the actual video. I've got a little bit of an unscripted video for you guys today. And this was inspired by, I woke up today and I saw there was a new hashtag on Twitter. It was called like hashtag thank you Game Freak. So it was pretty funny, like Pokemon, like now on their tweets, you're seeing like responses that both say bring back National Dex and thank you Game Freak. So now there's like this back and forth of people, arguing about whether they should be grateful to Game Freak or if they should be mad at them for cutting Pokemon. And so I kind of wanted to weigh in because it's been a topic that's been on my mind for a while. And I kind of wanted to talk about it, especially regarding things like the National Dex and what my opinion is on that. Sorry, like I said, unscripted. I'm going to be saying stupid stuff. So I just want to talk about why I'm excited about Sword and Shield, why I've decided to buy it, what I'll do if the game is ass. So I'm just going to go over a lot of things that I like and, touch on some of the things. I know I'm late, kind of, like this is not prime time to discuss things like National Dex or Pokemon Sword and Shield, but because the games are coming out in like 5 days or 6 days, I wanted to weigh in now and get my opinion out there before it becomes kind of irrelevant by the game's release. So, I wanted to talk about a lot of the things that I like about Pokemon, which is, for me, obviously the main draw of the game is battling. So, things that work to make battling easier or make competitive battling easier are obviously things that I'm going to enjoy, and things that make battling more streamlined I'm also going to enjoy. So things like, if you want to give your Pokemon like 300 proteins to max out their attack stat EVs, you can do that now. So unlimited supplements is a really big thing because no one wants to EV train. Nobody wants to do it. Things like it's easier to avoid wild encounters, which is nice. And also you can encounter specific Pokemon as well. Something else that's really nice is there's a lot of people who like competitive battling, but they also like to do things like shiny hunting. So they like to soft reset on legendaries or hatch a bunch of eggs and try and get shinies out of that. But it's very difficult without hacking, without using PK hacks, to make a shiny Pokemon that's also competitively viable. Because if you know anything about breeding in Sun and Moon, you'll know that it's very rough business to get a Pokemon that has the right nature, an egg move, the right EVs or IV, sorry, and shiny. Like getting all of those at the same time is just ridiculous. At the very least, you can use bottle caps to get their IV stats reflect a maxed out IV stat in those areas, but that's about as far as it went. But what's nice about Sword and Shield, especially from the recent news that's just come out, is you can make any Pokemon competitively viable because you can transfer egg moves from one species to another. You can max out their stats with bottle caps. Like I said, the protein thing, which makes EV training easier, and you can now change essentially a Pokemon's nature. So that you can take literally any Pokemon that you want that doesn't have the best stats or the right nature, and you can transform them into a competitive beast. So I think that's really cool for people who, let's say you have a Pokemon that you're trading all the way from your copy of Pokemon Emerald up through the DS games, up to the 3DS games with Pokebank, and now you're going to transfer them from Pokemon Home to Pokemon Sword and Shield. Obviously, you can't do that with every Pokemon because a lot of them got cut, but let's say you've got a Milotic that you've got since Pokemon Emerald that you've traded all the way up to Generation 7. And you have an emotional attachment to this particular Milotic because you've had it for so long, maybe it's got a cool nickname, and you want to use this particular Milotic because you have some emotional investment in it, but the stats aren't the best. It doesn't have great IVs and all that kind of stuff. You can actually make that Milotic competitively viable because there's nothing about that Pokemon's stats that you can't affect. Nature, IVs, and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's really important for people who have certain Pokemon who they really value above other ones because they might have a specific memory with them. but really can't use them in competitive, and that's really a shame for those people. So this will make competitive battling more fun for people who don't play the game competitively much in the previous generations, but might look to do so in future generations with their emotionally attached Pokemon. So I think that's a really cool change as well. That the fact that they've made it easier to use or to transform any Pokemon into a competitively viable one. I know that there was a lot of talk about the graphics being kind of weak, like the Ocarina of Zelda. What am I stupid? The Ocarina of Time tree comparison with that one tree, and it was super funny. You know, things like animations and stuff like that. So I totally understand where people are coming from, because this game does look like a GameCube game. And in some cases, it even looks like an N64 game with that tree. That tree, man. You know for damn sure they went back and fixed that one tree. You know, but I'm not typically one to judge people based on, or to judge games rather. Sorry, I'm not one to judge games based on the graphics only. Some of my favorite games of all time have subpar graphics. Like I played League of Legends like for years. And that game isn't really that pretty compared to any game that you could be playing. Bravely Second, Kid Icarus Uprising, and even Fire Emblem Three Houses. Fire Emblem Three Houses is another game that was kind of lambasted for being really ugly, and the whole like school setting made people like kind of cringe at the idea of a Fire Emblem set in a school. So that game had a lot going against it, and when it came out, turns out that game is absolutely fantastic. In fact, it's now my favorite Fire Emblem game of all time. It's probably, for a lot of people, it was received very well. I think it's the most successful Fire Emblem game of all time now. Don't quote me on that. I don't know if it surpassed Awakening, but I wouldn't be surprised. So that game ended up being fantastic despite its lack of graphical, let's say, flair. So I'm not really hung up about Pokemon not looking amazing, because some of my favorite Pokemon games don't look amazing by today's standards. You know, like Emerald is my favorite game, and that's pixel art. That might not compare to 3D graphics for a lot of people, right? So now I want to talk a little bit about the National Dex. I know a lot of people are concerned about the National Dex, and obviously for me, there are favorites that I'm sad not to see return. Like, some of my favorite Pokemon of all time are like Salamence, and Metagross, and Scizor, and Greninja, and Jirachi, and a lot of these Pokemon are not in the game. In fact, all those Pokemon are not in the game that I just listed. So obviously there are some favorites of mine that I'm not going to see return in the game, and that is unfortunate. But I do want to turn that conversation into, and I want to go on up on a little tangent about another game that I've played. I learned a valuable lesson from another Pokemon game about limited choice. And this is a game that's become probably my favorite Pokemon game, with the exception of Emerald and Crystal. And that game is called Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness. It's not a mainline series game. But what's interesting about that game is, despite all the Pokemon that existed at that time being available in Gale of Darkness, your effective personal Pokedex or list of usable Pokemon was limited to the predetermined Shadow Pokemon available you could use in that game. So if you've never played that game, the way it works is like there's these Shadow Pokemon that other trainers have, and then you steal those Pokemon from them, and then you can use them yourself. But the list of Pokemon that you could use in those games was limited only to the Shadow Pokemon that existed in the game. It was a predetermined list. And yeah, there were some cool ones you could catch. Like, you could catch a Shadow Salamence and the 3 legendary birds in Gale of Darkness, but those options were locked to the very end of the game, and so your choice to use them is kind of moot, because by the time you get to them, the game's over. And you could trade with the GBA games, but you can only do that when you finish the game, so you were never able to, like, use a Pokemon that you couldn't catch as a Shadow Pokemon from the beginning of the game. You'd have to wait until the end, and at that point the game's over, so what's the point? So your effective choice of Pokemon is limited, even more so than the actual list of Shadow Pokemon in the game. Realistically, the main choices you're going to be making in Shadow Pokemon for Gale of Darkness was maybe the first half of the Shadow Pokemon list. Despite that small variety of Pokemon, you'd think that would be an unpleasant experience, but I still found Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness to be a super fun game. And it taught me that sometimes when you limit the choice of players, depending on how you limit their choices, it can be unpleasant, obviously, but you can also find enjoyment in having limited options. For instance, there are Pokemon in Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness that I wouldn't have given a second thought to in the main games. Like Baltoy and Gulpin, for instance, are two Shadow Pokemon that you get really early on in Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness. So they're normally Pokemon that I wouldn't give a second thought to in the main games. But because they were one of the only choices that you get that early on, I was incentivized to use them because I had less options. And I actually found that I liked Baltoy and Gulpin a lot, which is something I wouldn't have discovered if I was never forced in a way to use them. So the limited options prevented me from staying in my safe zone. I was forced to experiment, and I found that my experience was very enjoyable. So what I took away from the experience of playing Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness was that the selection of Pokemon isn't the only determining factor of what makes a game fun. So I'm going to try and keep an open mind about the whole National Dex thing in light of that lesson that I learned from that game. So to me, yeah, there are some Pokemon I'd like to see return, but I'm trying to keep an open mind given what I already know. And at the very least, my absolute favorite Pokemon of all time, Frostlass, still in the game. And I do have some other favorites there too, like Drampa is one of my favorite Pokemon also, and he's there as well. People are like, Drampa? Why are you like Drampa? Shut up! Drampa's cool, okay? Drampa's sick. Don't you talk shit about my boy Drampa. That's my dude. Okay. So yeah, in general, I'm going to try and give the game a chance where I think a lot of people are frustrated about things that may not even matter. Like, graphical fidelity is nice, but it's not a requirement. And, like I said, I've learned that a full Pokedex isn't a necessity for fun. I will say, though, on the off chance that these games are garbage, I will have serious reservations about buying the next game in the future, though, because the reasons for things like a slashed Pokedex or horrendous graphics or performance issues is due to the unwillingness to properly fund the production of Sword and Shield, which is a product born of the highest grossing multimedia company in the entire world. It's like $100 billion that they have, or something close. It's like $92 billion or something crazy or absurd like that, and that's a lot of money. And they really should have thrown like a few more $1 million at Sword and Shield to make those games like the way that they should have been, the way that those games really deserve to be made. And like, oh, it's a lot of money to just be, a couple million, like you say, like it's so easy. Like, okay, I don't think people realize the absurd difference between $1 million and $1 billion. So I'll put it this way: 1 million seconds is 12 days. 1 billion seconds, 32 years. They absolutely have the means to make things like a full Pokedex and better performance and better graphics a reality. Pokemon Company absolutely will still see a huge return on that investment. Their games sell like crazy. They sell like 20,000 units plus no matter what the hardware is. Or not 20,000, 20 million units plus no matter what the hardware is. But they don't feel a need to spend more money on the games because they know people will buy the game anyway, so they're not going to. So if Sword and Shield suck because of their limitations, even though I don't think that the games will be ass, but if on the off chance that the games do absolutely suck and there's if there's nothing redeemable from Sword and Shield because of these issues, then I'll probably decide at that point not to support the series going forward. But I don't think it's going to come to that point because these games do look amazing from the changes that I've seen. So, but I'm just saying, like, if it gets to that point, then I'll probably decide not to support the series going forward until I see the mainline series get the treatment and care that a franchise of its caliber ought to receive. But with that said, like I said, I absolutely do not think these games are going to disappoint. I've seen all the leaks, which I'm not going to share, by the way. I've seen all the leaks, and I've been up to date with the quality of life changes and the trailers and all the information that's come out from the official Pokemon Company. And based on that alone, I think this is shaping up to be the best game in the series by a mile. And that's just considering what we've seen before the game is even out. Like, by the time the game's actually out and we see all the other features that they probably didn't show us, we'll probably see even more stuff. Because I feel like they took to heart the whole, like, people were complaining during Sun and Moon that they were showing too much of those games. And now I think they've just catapulted in the other direction, and now they're showing, like, nothing at all. I feel like they kind of think people are stupid because I've seen the leaks, I've seen the Pokedex, I've seen the other Pokemon that are in the game, I've seen some of the features, and it's like, there are so many amazing other Pokemon, for instance, that they could have been showing for people to get excited about, but all they wanted to show us in advertising was, oh, look at this Charizard, look at this Pikachu, look at this Meowth, look at this fucking Ponyta and Farfetch and all these other Kanto Pokemon in the Galar region. I feel like they think that their audience is stupid and will only like the game if they're shown Kanto stuff. So I feel like whoever worked on the marketing for Sword and Shield really messed up in not only the lack of stuff that they showed us leading up to the game's release, because there's a ton of amazing features and other Pokemon in here that people would definitely get excited about, but also in the lack of showing us anything at all. So they need to strike a balance between Sword and Shield's lack of information and trash information when they do show stuff, and Sun and Moon's showing too much. They gotta like not catapult one way or the other. They gotta like be in the middle and find a good middle ground for for advertising, because I think the marketing for this game actually could have used a lot of work. So because we've seen so little, I think that the games will be even better because we're gonna see all the stuff in the game when they're actually out. So yeah, I'm still excited about Sword and Shield, and that's why I'm going to be buying the game, and that's why I'm still excited about it. And those are my thoughts about National Dex and thank you Game Freak and all that stuff. And I've said my piece, and that's pretty much all there is to say. So I hope you guys have a nice day, and watch my Zelda guide. Okay, bye.